You know when you see a tweet just go viral and explode into this angry mob? Or maybe you've felt that insane energy sweep you up at a huge protest. Or we're about to dive into a book from way back in 1895 that honestly might explain our world today better than anything written this year. It's Gustave Le Bon's super controversial classic, The Psychology of Crowds.
So let's just start with a question for you. Think about it. The last time you were in a massive crowd, maybe a concert, a big game, whatever, did you feel and did you act exactly the same way you would if you were just sitting by yourself? Gustave Le Bon's answer to that was a hard no, and his whole theory is about why that is.
To really get what Le Bon was talking about, we've got to go back in time, back to his world. See, he was writing in the late 19th century, and it was a time of massive, massive change and a lot of anxiety. And he believed all that chaos was giving birth to a new and kind of terrifying new power.
From where Le Bon was sitting, it looked like the traditional pillars of society, religion, monarchy, all that stuff, they were just crumbling. And in that power vacuum, you had the Industrial Revolution, cities were getting packed, and he saw this new, unpredictable force bubbling up. He was convinced a new power was about to take over.
And this was his big prophecy. He basically declared that the 20th century wouldn't be defined by kings or politicians, but by the raw will of the masses. The fate of nations, he said, wasn't going to be decided in palaces anymore, but in the soul of the crowd.
So, when Le Bon says crowd, what is he actually talking about? He doesn't just mean a bunch of people standing around. Nope. He was describing this bizarre, almost magical transformation, the creation of what he called a psychological crowd. And this right here, this is the absolute core of his whole idea. Le Bon argued that, under just the right conditions, all the individual minds in a group can just disappear. They merge into a single collective consciousness. It's like they become a brand new creature, a temporary being that thinks and acts in ways that none of its individual members would ever do on their own.
That's the million-dollar question, right? How does a group of totally distinct, rational people suddenly melt into one unthinking being? Well, Le Bon thought he had it figured out. He laid out a pretty clear three-step psychological process.
So here's how it goes down, according to him. First, you feel anonymous. You're lost in the sea of faces, and that little voice of personal responsibility just fades away. Then, step 2 is contagion. Emotions and ideas start spreading like a wildfire, completely overriding your own personal judgment. And finally, you become super suggestible. It's almost like you're in a trance, ready to act on any impulse the crowd throws at you.
Okay, and this is where Le Bon's whole analysis takes a really dark, really provocative turn. He didn't just think people in crowds were different, he was arguing that they were fundamentally worse.
I mean, get this. According to Le Bon, just by joining a crowd, you basically de-evolve. A civilized, thinking person instantly becomes a barbarian, an instinctive creature that's not guided by logic anymore, but by primitive, raw impulse. The crowd, he says, just rips away that thin layer of civilization.
This collective mind, it's a slave to its impulses. It can swing from being bloodthirsty and cruel one minute to incredibly heroic and generous the next, all based on whatever suggestion hits it. There's no planning. It's all pure reaction.
And your ability to think critically? Yeah, that just goes right out the window. For the crowd, anything is possible. The most ridiculous rumor, the slightest suspicion, it instantly becomes an absolute, undeniable truth. They think in powerful images, not in logic, and they mistake those images for reality.
And finally, oh boy, the crowd is just ruthlessly intolerant. It demands total conformity. If you disagree, it doesn't see that as a point for discussion. It sees it as an attack that has to be crushed. In Le Bon's mind, the crowd is, by its very nature, a tyrant.
I mean, when you put it side by side like this, the transformation is just, wow, it's night and day. The conscious, rational person you are is replaced by this unconscious, instinctive creature. Reason gets swapped out for pure suggestion, and your sense of responsibility just vanishes into the safety of the anonymous mob. It's a total psychological takeover. All right, so we've got this new creature, this collective mind. We know it doesn't use reason. So how on earth does it get ideas? And what happens to those ideas once they get lodged in the crowd's brain?
See, you can't persuade a crowd with a logical argument or a nuanced presentation. Le Bon says that's pointless. Ideas have to be boiled down into simple, powerful, and totally absolute images. They have to be felt on a gut level, not rationally understood.
And once an idea grabs hold of a crowd, it stops being just an opinion. It becomes a religion. You get this adoration, this blind submission, this total intolerance for anyone who doesn't believe. I mean, those aren't the signs of a healthy debate, right? That's a fanatical belief system. The idea becomes an unshakable dogma.
Le Bon used this really powerful historical comparison to drive his point home. He argued that the political fanatics during the French Revolution's reign of terror were driven by the exact same psychological forces as the religious inquisitors during the Spanish Inquisition. Sure, the thing they worshipped was different, but that blind, intolerant faith? Identical. So, where does all this leave us today? It's been over a century, but Le Bon's work still echoes, mainly because it gives us this powerful and, yeah, pretty unsettling way to understand mass movements. And this is maybe the biggest, most crucial takeaway from the whole book, especially for anyone who wants to influence people, from politicians to advertisers. Don't even try to persuade with facts and data. Instead, create simple, powerful, seductive images that capture the popular imagination. That, Le Bon says, is the real key to power. At the end of the day, this is Le Bon's vision of us in the modern world. We like to think we're independent, rational beings. But the moment we join the collective, we become little more than a grain of sand in a massive sandstorm, just blown around by forces we don't control and maybe don't even understand.
And that leaves us with one huge question for our time. If a crowd doesn't need to be physically together, if all it needs is a shared emotional focus, what does that mean for us right now? In this world of digital mobs and viral hashtags, are we actually more vulnerable to the crowd mind than any generation before us? Le Bon predicted the era of crowds was coming. Maybe we're the ones who are finally living deep inside of it.